I think we've paid homage to a lot of the bands who sort of pioneered the fucking beginning of it, and that's I think the point that Dean and I were saying today is that to those books and all that shit with those guys. I mean that was probably well intentioned, but they've forgotten where it really started. Couldn't wait to get fucking chomping on the bit to get it going.
Right, you cannot deny the bands that fucking we were kids. We used to go to these jolts in Joburg, all around Joburg, and that's the bands we saw.
Brin, yeah, we go again.
Yeah. And it's because of them that we started playing fucking metal. And you cannot deny that shit. It's like, I mean, even going back, as I said, like to the South African Sons and Band of Gypsies, that's long back. But Tully Macaulay, the Macaulay Workshop, they were one of the like pioneering rock bands in South Africa as well. Started in the 60s, still going now, I think.
I mean, we can do Abstract Truth, Freedom's Children, all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was called underground stuff. But,
Sure.
you know?
Yeah, but even us in Namibia, we knew of you guys. Obviously, as time progressed, we found out about more SA bands and and then we also followed that stuff. And that gave us the inertia to start in Namibia and just... Against all odds, I might say. I mean, it's probably a similar situation with South Africa. Most of the people listen to Kwaito, and yet we managed to fill out the only big venue in Namibia was the Warehouse in Windhoek, and we managed.
I remember it well.
Obviously, we didn't play there like every fucking weekend because it's a bit of an oversaturation for a heavy act. But I don't think we've ever had under 300 people.
Well, bro, when we did our first gig at the Irish Club, this was following bands like Pentagon and Unchained and all those guys. They offered us a residency there. And the first 3 months we played there, we played like 7 songs repeatedly on the night. Like we had a set of 7 songs, which we played 3 or 4 times until we started writing originals and the scene started growing, you know. So
you start small.
Yeah, that's the way it works. So.
Next question to you guys and Brin as well. Was there ever... the possibility in those early days, but even later with Metamorphosis, did you ever have proposals, offers to transcend the borders of South Africa?
I know Morphosis probably did. I know VOD definitely did.
But back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was still kind of like uncharted territory for local metal bands. And as much as we wished someone would notice us, it was just difficult to imagine getting. I mean, we imagined it, in our dreams, but it was difficult to imagine that in reality we could get out of South Africa to more of the world. And I think that's when Neil and I went to London, was just specifically for that reason. Is that if we stuck in South Africa, you know, we're hitting this wall. We can't progress any further because either there's not enough market for the music, or various reasons. And then things kind of fell out between Phillip Nel and us. And Neil and I took off to London, where we were hoping to find a drummer and then start a band, kind of thing, you know.
And when you first said you got to South Africa and you came to see Ragnärok, and that was our last gig. That was the same thing with me and Sash. Our mind in 1988 was, let's get the fuck out of here and go to Europe. We went to Belgium to try and get it going over there. And obviously things didn't happen, and that's how we ended up back in South Africa. But that's the same, exactly what you're talking about.
Same thing. And, you know, Neil and I tried for a year to get something going in London. And what we found out was that, you know, any good drummer had 10 bands waiting for them to drop out of that band. So you're just not going to find a drummer, you know. And we did a few rehearsals here and there, and then things just kind of went south. And one day we fled back to South Africa from London. And day or that same day, I think Martin came across the street in Rocky Street and said, "Hey, you guys want to start a band?" and that was Two Dogs Fucking, and it was basically Neil and myself, Martin from Urban Assault, and Dean was, huh?
And he was in Toxic Socks before that.
He was in Toxic Socks before that, yeah. And Dean, who we'd played with in Odyssey. So that was just like the band happened overnight.
Yeah.
And remember we had Rusty come and sing with us for like the first. We figured, look, I didn't want to sing anymore because I found that it really took away from just me being able to play. And in Odyssey, I was kind of forced back onto the microphone because we couldn't find the singer that would do it. I mean, we had everyone from Aldo Klein to, Walter, who worked at Hillbrow Records, who had long hair. We would just try anyone with long hair. And in the end, I ended up singing in Odyssey, and as much as I didn't want to, it kind of worked for what we were doing.
Well, you did a fucking great job on that album.
Amen. Agreed.
I don't care what anyone says about those vocals. I know back in the day, it was like, oh, the vocals are a bit light and this and that. But what you did on that album was fucking fantastic.
It had that African heavy metal rock feel.
End of story. What I said about Odyssey and even Ragnarok. If Odyssey and Ragnarok and all those bands, Aragon, if we were in America or in Europe at that time, we would have gone a lot further than we were being in Africa.
That's what I was trying to say just now. With if you had back then that sort of whack and deal, or people like here in Germany, a lot of influential people are like Götz Kuhnemund from Rock Hard magazine. If they would have whiffed that Odyssey album, they probably know it of it by now. But if they did at the time, I tell you, it would have been a different story. I mean, I think
Odyssey had this weird. Odyssey was in, if you look at it in the context of when it was released, just as the Black Album came out and Countdown to Extinction, or whichever one Brin mentioned earlier from Megadeth. If you look at it in that context, it was so unique. It was like the border between the heavy stuff, and it also brought in some of the songs like Toothpick Liquor and Bad Boys, and that kind of, it was like
more rock sounding, yeah.
Yeah, it was a mix of all of that together, which made it really fucking special.
And you know what? People don't. The best Odyssey song called Guilty. It was never released. And I have that.
I have a copy on tape. Well, not on tape. That Phil sent me one day. That he found on the tape. So it's not usable. It's like you can hear it wowing and fluttering on the tape. And I don't think it's even a finished version. I don't think we ever finished the song.
You're a perfectionist. Sorry, Jon. It sounds like we're doing a self.
No. This leads me. I love this. No, we're getting.
But the point. I think the point is that it was just because we were kind of landlocked in South Africa, and because it wasn't a market, and the rest of the world was already like thriving in metal, and it was just worldwide. It was huge. It was like the huge
Guns N' Roses and all that shit.
All that shit, and we felt almost. Inadequate being stuck in South Africa and not being able to expose ourselves and show, look, we can play too, or look at these other bands. There was no like tunnel out of South Africa for our music, and I don't think anyone was like paying attention to South Africa in that respect. Anyway, when the end of apartheid came, we thought, okay, they're going to open the doors. We're going to have international. Nothing. It's
over. No disrespect. That's the reason why we didn't get the Roadrunner gig. I mean
and going back to the point earlier about did we have aspirations of overseas? Like when we were in Two Dogs, we got offered that tour. Remember from some Jason guy? I think his name was Jason. I can't remember his surname. But they offered us this. We were in Two Dogs. We were going to come on a tour in London and Europe. I even resigned from my job. Remember that, man?
Oh yeah.
And then the tour fell through because of some fucking politics or some bullshit. So there I was jobless, fucking rocking in Rocky Street. It was like, you know what I mean? So there were, you asked earlier, did we ever get approached from international? And we did. It happened to these guys. It happened to us. VOD are a perfect example.
But we mustn't forget Groinchurn, right? The boys.
Oh, bro.
I mean,
first crossover band.
Their grindcore stuff. I mean, what is it? Grindcore. I mean, crazy bunch of guys. I mean, they sold
and top players.
Oh yes, I mean the style of vibe they played was just on a different level. I mean, I can't comprehend the music. I don't understand it, but Jesus, it's got amazing.
There was nothing in South Africa like that.
They were just definitely ahead of the curve. I mean, that's why they sold a shitload in different darkest parts of Eastern Europe and stuff. I mean, they were different.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, it's funny that like South America and like Eastern Europe, and Greece,
they're crazy.
They go looking for it. They go looking for it.
Brin, back in the day, we used to get, when we were selling stuff online, we used to get US dollars sent from Cuba. The first thing I used to roll it, I'm like, we don't do that online. And we used to send stuff back. They used to send us cash in envelopes. I should not. And oh my God, I had an army bowl sack full of fan mail of stuff that's sent in US dollars and weird currencies to send the cassettes and DVDs, CDs back. Because there was no like what we've got online today. And people don't realize that underground scene was massive.
Yes, but people were hungrier. When it wasn't nowadays you can get everything. You just watch the album, and people were hungry. And that's one of the sad parts. Has the thought ever crossed your mind to re-record older material with the modern technology?
Okay, I'll tell you first thing. I hate to always go back to Metallica, but like there's all these, the fucking lifelong history of Injustice War. Please can't you guys re-record it with the bass turned up and that? And James Hetfield's like, fuck that, man. It's not about the bass being too soft. We all know it was too soft. But that record happened at that point in time, and that's what it is.
And it would be
Metallica song ever, Harvesters of Sorrow.
And I feel like I've thought about it before. The other day, a couple of years ago, I messaged my brother and I was like, I want to know, maybe we should re-record those Ragnärok songs we did with Lawrence in the garage with one microphone hanging from the ceiling because it's only on a cassette. And Robbie was like, my brother said to me, no, fuck that shit, man. That's what it was at that point in time. Leave it like that.
Yeah, and I've moved on.
Yeah.
That was a moment in time, and I've moved on, and I'm doing other stuff.
Yeah. But okay, let me rephrase that. I mean, obviously, Metallica, it's a big thing. The album's out, and it's good. I personally love Justice the way it is. It's cool.
Me too.
Somebody on YouTube actually went out and played a fantastic bass on there. It sounds great.
The dude was incredible, man.
And a lot of bands re-record albums, and like Exodus redid Bonded by Blood. I don't know why.
And Manowar redoing the albums. Why the fuck?
That's terrible. But I'm saying more like let me an example now. I don't want to touch on your guys' music. I want to say an example is, for instance, something Greg and me've talked about. Look, at the end of the day, it'll probably be a decision between the four of them, the original VOD members. But for instance, redoing a Black Cathedral or doing actually. No! Or actually doing the Trojan Horse album with a.
Have you ever heard a record that's been remixed that you enjoy better than the original?
No.
Even if
Brin, you're right. It sounds plastic.
But even if the remix is all this, yeah, sure, it's going to be way better quality and it's going to be up to date with the standards of now. But it fucking never matches
You've
the
lost
energy.
The nuance of the takes.
One record, Pink Floyd, Animals.
Interesting.
Amazing remix.
Say again, Brent, I didn't hear that.
Pink Floyd Animals, the remix is amazing. But I think that's the only time in the history of anything, even remasters. And I so much cringe to want to go and remix the Odyssey record or remaster it or something, just to kind of.
That's a remix.
I can't get rid of the reverb on my vocal by remastering it. I have to remix it.
No, you can't.
But you're talking about a remix, not a re-record.
Both. Well, a remix. So can you imagine re-recording it? It's just like doing a cover. Okay, yeah. You're just doing covers now, and even like the remasters of like old ZZ Top records, where suddenly the drums sound all like modern and stuff. It doesn't work.
Yeah,
Johan, I haven't experienced that stuff now. The album me and Vas did recently, the Philistine album.
Philistine, yeah.
Like I was sitting there and I thought before we actually recorded and sent everything to Theo Kraus, who's Theo Kraus is, right?
Yeah.
I thought, you know what? Maybe let me just redo that guitar piece before I send it to him. And I sit there and I play it, and it's a bit of a better recording, but the vibe is not there.
No, that's it.
It's not the same vibe.
I think you guys have a point there, and that's probably what a lot of bands lose, is because that original hunger and energy and fire isn't. You can't reproduce that.
Robert Johnson recordings don't sound good.
Yeah,
but you can't replace them.
Yeah.
You just can't replace them.
Imagine trying to re-record War Pigs. No.
Yeah.
It won't happen, bro.
I actually just found out I was talking to Mark Williams the other day, and I found out he did the Philistine cover.
You did?
He's like, you didn't read the cover? I was like, dude, no, I didn't. I'm sorry.
No, we're not here to talk about Philistine. We're talking about issue of SA music.
Yeah, but still, you know what I mean.
Still, it comes back to that. Would you want to re-record
it? Just a little geographical question. You more Gauteng-based bands. Have you played the Cape?
Oh yes, of course.
The Cape?
Played the Cape. I could tell you a story, but then probably you have to delete this. But no, you're also playing Cape Town. Green turtle. What's it? Purple turtle.
Okay, it wasn't in the time when I was there. It must have been after. Yeah.
Yeah, there was. Yeah. Yes.
We never played the Cape. We only all the bands I was in went as far as Durban. Only.
Cape Town, East London,
which
Durban, Elizabeth,
Mafeking,
Welkom, which would
Botswana.
Botswana, yeah.
That's probably what drove the impetus over there with what are they called? Overthrust and Metal Orange.
Dean's got the video of that.
Yeah.
That night.
But now you're talking radio. I mean, somebody mentioned Phil Wright. Now, there in my mind is another force in South Africa.
That guy did for South African metal what no one else did. Agreed. No one else did it. That most of the time in our days when they said, "Oh, you guys want to do a radio interview?" It was like fucking 3 a.m. Barney Simon even mocked us. He mocked us on air.
Yeah.
A couple of times.
Two dogs funky. It's like, what the fuck's that got to do with anything? You know what I mean? Yeah, they are nose rings in their ear and earrings in their nose.
What?
And yeah, stupid shit. And he's like, "You guys are doing a gig this New Year's." Yes, we are. Two Dogs Funky. And he said, "Who's opening up for you?" So Brin tunes, "Fuck rugby." we were our own opening band. So we wanted to be.
That was the tattoos. That was it.
We put sheets over our heads, cut holes in, and like we wore and we propped instruments and shit, and we called the band "Fuck Rugby."
But you know why? You know why we called it "Fuck Rugby"? Because it was right when the World Cup was coming to South Africa, and there was all the posters around town, and there was Springboks fucking snails, and there was all these fucking weird posters that were like really crude. Because what happened in South Africa is it went from one day it was very like puritanical, and the next day there was Hustler magazines like pasted all over the walls in town, and that was just like.
But the interview when Brin pops up, he goes, "Yeah, fuck rugby." They cut the show. The one technician comes running out the back. "You can't say that on radio." Brin goes, "Fuck you, man! I just did." It's like fucking. Oh, it was classic, bro. But that was the issue that we faced back then. Like if you did get a chance to get on radio stuff, it was at 3 a.m, or if you saw it on
mockery.
TV, and the mock. We felt that mockery in Namibia as well. It was always,
and they would always
like this little snide remarks, and yeah.
And Phil Wright wasn't like that. Phil Wright was like he was like
Phil was there.
Phil was like
Phil Odyssey album. Phil Wright brought us into his studio and he gave us a full hour. He played every track of the album and he asked us whatever we wanted to talk about, and it got onto radio, which was unheard of for metal in those days.
He was like the South African John Peel. You know, really
straight up, man.
I love that. Exactly. I mean, Phil Wright and I, for those who know, I mean, we're best mates. I mean, he's the godfather to my son, and I mean, he died too young. Jesus Christ, he could party like there's no tomorrow. But you know what? He loved the blues, he loved jazz, he loved rock, but his passion was metal, and he was the one. He doesn't matter. 2-3 o'clock in the morning, you can't play metal. He would slip in a fucking demo there, next metal band. And he'd be playing all those metal gigs. He would be there.
And what a professional. I used to record voiceovers after all the bands had done that. Phil, I worked in a studio in Sandton, and Phil used to come in and do voiceovers for like Absa Bank and all that shit. He'd come in straight from a job. Fucking, I'm like, Phil, are you sure you can do this shit? And you look at me and go, "Well, I'm gonna fucking try." And he'd get in that booth and he would just nail it every single time.
That voice.
When we were doing the Odyssey interviews with him, he was still splicing tape together in between the commercials, splicing tape. It's unheard of. You know, now it's all computer Pro Tools and shit. He was like splicing tape while we were having the commercial breaks and that. He was like a total pro, man.
Oh, these are gems.
It gave us the launching pad. Having like because I think he took what Phil Nel was doing seriously,
100%.
And then Phil Nel was like feeding the stuff to Phil Wright. And I think it was just at the point where the technicality and the quality of the music, kind of late 80s, was like coming up to snuff, that you could actually put it on the radio if you were allowed to, you know. And we would stay up at like 3 a.m. and listen because we knew he was going to play our track, and we'd just wait for it. And that was like the most amazing thing in the world. They actually played us on the radio, you know. It was just like, you know,
we've made it.
Talk about thanks to Phil Wright. I mean, he was such a pioneer for breaking down the barriers to going, hey, heavy metal bands and heavy rock bands are cool. They're not all fucking out of control.
You know what else? I can't forget this part. Okay, so we got a little radio play, but when we got not signed up, but when we were working with the editor of Blush magazine, which was a teenage girls magazine in South Africa.
Yeah, because I feel you're good looking back in there with your hair, Brin.
You won't believe the gigs we got because of that. We were playing on these big festivals because we'd been in the magazines. All these little girls were like looking at our picture in the magazines, and they didn't know that we played metal. We were just like the cute rock band or something, you know. And we got booked on all these big festivals to go and play there, where even the festival didn't know what kind of music we played. And of course, we were the only metal band on the ticket, you know. And we would show up, and it would just it would go from like family friendly to just what the fuck just happened. And then anything that happened after us was irrelevant. You know, like the pop bands, you know, like all these pop bands.
Destroyed.
Huh?
Destroyed.
Well, no one knew what to think after we'd finished playing, because they'd never seen anything like this before, you know. I mean, we're talking about like the mainstream crowd. They'd never seen anything like this before. And we're booked obviously on the wrong gig, you know. But we were getting these gigs, like 4,000 people, and because of Blush magazine. Because now we were in Blush magazine every month when it came out, and of course they were dolling us up, and we had perms, and they took the glam thing like all the way.
Yeah.
But it really did help. I have to say that Odyssey's success is thanks to Phil Wright, Phillip Nel, and Sharon Dale from Blush magazine, who became our manager because she figured this is something that like these young girls are gonna love if we put this in the magazine, you know. And she did it, and you know, that was a whole relationship that worked for a while. But 5 minutes. But that really was the third driving force behind getting Odyssey, at least locally, kind of in the mainstream eye to an extent. We weren't cinema, but we played with cinema. We weren't yet No Friends of Harry. They had a couple of records out. People knew the name. They had a following, but we played with No Friends of Harry. And what we did went stealing all their fans too, you know. So it really worked out. And in the end, we built relationships with these bands that we ended up using. We played with them many times after that. From these festivals.
And you know what, you make such the difference with Metamorphosis was because we were deemed as a sellout for a whole fucking period of time. Do you know why? Because we made a decision as a metal band, we played not just want to be metal bands. We played go on tour with New Girls, Lithium, Amersham. We'd go and say all those rock and pop bands, because what the fuck, we want to diversify and show everybody that we are, and we love what they played. I mean, I'm a big Speak New Girls fan, a great fucking band. Like
they had better stages. We didn't want to play
exactly.
Club. We wanted to play on the big stage with the lights.
Exactly. I mean, and then we got, well, you sell out Vas in your band. You're not just true metal band. We played all those guys. That's what it's fucking, nothing wrong with that.
I'll tell you a quick story that relates to the big festival kind of things. When we were playing in Brothering, the first ever South African national, what do they call it? National Freedom Day was in Vereniging, and it was in the stadium, and they asked us to play there. And we go there, and the whole stadium is like 98% African people. So we get on stage, we start jamming. There's guys in the front, so all the drunk dudes are all jiving and that, but most of the audience was standing in front of us like this. Get the fuck off, bro. And we were like, no, we're finishing our set, man. It was like, after that, like you said, after the Odyssey thing, it was destroyed. Like every band that came on after that, people were like, well, what the fuck's going on here now?
Yeah.
Our ears are blown. You know, it's South Africa is a weird place, bro, when it comes to music. It's like, especially
especially that back then, the movement, the metal movement, was very small. I mean, I think I remember at the beginning when I got there was 100, maybe 200 headbangers in the whole of Joburg. 4 years later or 3 years later, we were filling the Thunderdome with like 4,000 people, kind of thing. So there was definitely this thing that they latched onto, and it grew quickly, and allowed us to kind of funnel our way into this South African music scene that was not there for us at all. I mean, it was, like I said earlier, it was African music, because that's where the market is. All these pop bands or cover bands that would do like residencies at Thunderdome or wherever, you know, Mela and whatever his name is. You know, we played with them too at the and it was just like,
Walk This Way.
We were never Little Sister.
Huh?
Remember we played with Little Sister at the Coffin.
Mela is Walk This Way.
Walk This Way, that's right. Walk This Way. Now, can you picture it? I mean, it's like putting Judas Priest with Milli Vanilli on the same ticket. You know, it doesn't work, but it worked because it got us exposure that we needed to this crowd who didn't know we existed, and who didn't even know the movement existed, that or what it was. I mean, when we played in places like Klerksdorp, those guys had no clue.
They thought you were like
what they were about to see or hear. They had no clue. And it was always shocking. But I think we were kind of nice guys in a sense too, that we didn't get beat up too much. But we did get beat up.
It's a good thing like Metamorphosis didn't come with us.
You know, going back to being kind of behind the times. So we brought out our record roughly the same time as like the Black Album and Symphony of Destruction, and we all got reviewed in some British magazine. I think it was Kerrang. It could have been Thrasher. I don't know. Thrasher was American. Anyway, so we get this thing, Metallica, like 90% essential. Megadeth, 80%, just you got to have it in your collection. Odyssey, 30%, avoid.
Oh, man.
Because we're being put up against these guys who are 5 years ahead of us, and we're just like, not quite there yet kind of thing, you know? Now, I've gained a lot more respect for Odyssey over the years since I've known that there's actually been this underground thing happening in Greece, in South America, where they really dig the band, and they're the ones buying all these expensive albums on eBay. But it just kind of goes back to that point that we were we weren't getting the bands in. We weren't getting, like when I was in Brussels, we were seeing those bands in real time. The next morning we could like play like them, kind of thing. That's how we felt. Whereas in South Africa, we had to wait for someone to sneak the record in. Maybe someone had a videotape. You know, you couldn't go and see the band. So it's normal so in a way, we kind of had the South African sound because we were kind of left to our own devices like everything else in South Africa at the time. And it just gave us, the one thing I take away from that whole experience back then was that even though we were 5 years behind, we weren't quite up to snuff with the international touring bands. We had a thing that none of these other bands ever had.
Yep.
And that was no security at the nightclubs. There were no rules. I mean, people would climb up the PA speakers and jump off into the pit, and no one would say anything. They'd jump on stage and pull someone off the stage, and no one would say anything. You just have to like find your way back to the stage. Yep. And when I went to live in the States later, this is something it kind of clicked. It's like we had it different. No matter how like behind we were in the times, we had it different in South Africa because we didn't have the exposure. We had to make it up. We had to make it up ourselves and hope that we're kind of going in the right direction, that if we were to break out, that we wouldn't be too slack and too far behind.
Amen.
That's 100% you.
Completely isolated, yeah.
We created our own little bubble. It was like Rocky Suite was like late. This was like 10 years after everything started, or 8 or 9 years.
Careful.
It was like our own LA, bro. It was like completely unique to Africa, or to South Africa. And like Brin was just saying, it was
to the world.
The fucking rules, man. And it was just, like you're saying, jumping off the PA. I mean, Cliffy falling onto his head off of the first story in the Doors Club. You know what I mean? That kind of shit. It was just out of control. And bleeding that into the music, it bled into the music because we played what we played. Even though we had heard stuff from our favorite bands and records, we were still 5 years behind. So like when Master of Puppets came out, we didn't hear it in 85. Yeah. We heard it in like 86 or 87, that kind of thing. So us creating music from, say, the first album, in albums that came out in 83, we were starting to write music from stuff with influencing us from 83. But meanwhile, it was 1985 already.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of lag we had there, which created the unique thing that South African bands had. They all bands, Metamorphosis, one of the probably the best death metal band that ever came out of South Africa. You go listen to those 2 first albums they released now, and you listen to it within the mindset of being back in the time they were released. They were completely fucking international level.
Never heard of them.
They were death metal. They were death metal bands that weren't playing that kind of stuff. They were really. I mean, you were telling me earlier that their first album, Embrace Your Creation, sold over 100,000 cassettes internationally. That's fucking unheard of in South Africa, man.
Amazing. That's good.
And it was really good shit. Like you compare.
And how much money did we get for it? That's it. It was never about the money.
I mean, that's the same as the same as the Odyssey thing. But I mean, if you go back into the time when it was released and you listen to the death metal that was coming out internationally and what Metamorphosis was doing at that time, Metamorphosis sounded completely unique to that other death metal because it originated in Africa.
Yeah, definitely had its own signature sound. Definitely.
That's it. And that's what I think a lot of the bands did. You name them, Odyssey, Aragon, whatever. They all had that.
I got to... Just too quickly, just a thought that came up now is that Death of Africa thing. I want to get into sound just now, but I got so many, because that Morbid Records, Germany played a big role in distributing that over here. And a lot of guys told me when we were on tour with Catatonia and In the Woods were telling me the sound was amazing and that the bands were so unique. And that it was, but that was also the time when the Metamorphosis thing was out. And then just they were talking about the kind of styles that had developed in SA and that it wasn't typical for like US or Swedish bands,
Yeah.
But the next thing is I think South Africa for me was always, I'm just speaking for I know that it's not that relevant for the topic of origin of metal in SA, but I think a big stumbling block that I've always found was to get engineers and sound guys to understand what you want to do. I don't know how did it feel to you guys when the Odyssey? I mean, Odyssey, we're talking the album 91. I'm seeing here Ragnärok 89, 88. What was that? Did you have problems communicating to engineers and producers what you want?
It wasn't even that. They didn't have the ear.
Yes,
there was one guy who had the ear.
Yeah.
And it was Skulk. And when we'd go up and play at the Thunderdome, and there would be some monkey on the sound trying to do a pop band, and we'd be like, Skulk, you got to come now. Because these guys didn't have the ear. They didn't know what metal needed to sound like. So it was really tough. And even when you get to the studio, you're like, that's not how my guitar's supposed to sound. It's like, and there's a thing, and I'm almost convinced that there's this South African sound in production. You hear it in No Friends of Harry, you hear it in the Odyssey record, you hear it in all these old records that came out. There's this thing that they do, and I'm not sure quite what it is, but it's a little, it's too processed on one end, and it's not good on the other end. It doesn't quite gel the way it should. When you go and listen to our record and then you listen to like something that came out of like the States or the UK, you know, that's the whole piece. And it was really difficult for us to communicate what it should sound like to someone who doesn't have the history of listening to it.
Yes.
And you can't just listen to it once and say, okay, yeah, so the guitars have to be loud.
Exactly.
There's more to it than that.
That's exactly what I've witnessed as well. You bring in, like, say, they tell you to bring in a reference CD. And I think at one point I brought in, must have been a Metal Church album or something like that, or Master of Puppets for that matter. And they would not, and, you know, but what came out was, no, because there's no idea how to get there. And a lot of it was layering guitars and, you know, that kind of dynamic as well.
Johan, I just want, if I can interject, so if we scroll back because we have to give the pioneers their due, right? Mm-hmm. You listen to that Black Rose album. I mean, it's thin. It sounds like the latest Def Leppard stuff on ketamine. I mean, fucking seriously. I mean, great songs. We watched those songs live, and they had the producer, and bless his soul, he's no longer with us. But that's what happens when there's no one who's grown up in that music, who's played that music, who can produce that music, get Black Rose signed to a label, and then the producer comes in there and it's fucking paper thin. It's not the producer's fault. He doesn't get the music. He doesn't understand it, to Brin's point. And now we fast forward. So what happens? And we get someone like Phillip Nel, which has taken a beating from a load of people over the years. But if we like it or not, what he did, I mean, Phillip Nel, if you look at his credentials as an engineer and producer, has done so many South African musicians, from country to pop, you name it, he's done it. But he took the fucking leap and embraced trying to get heavy metal bands on the map. And I mean, you have your own view of what your sound that he created for your band, but at least he made the effort to try and give us our unique sound. And inadvertently, if you liked it or not, if you listen back now, you go, you know what, it wasn't great, but fuck, it gave us that unique sound. And bless him, I mean, he did VOD, Debauch You, Retribution Denied, I mean, Odyssey, Urban Assault. No one else was prepared to, careful how I say this, proverbial cock on the block. Okay, may have to edit that. But to give us all an opportunity and to actually, if it wasn't for him, Abhorrence, another one, we'll talk about Art from Just Ginger, there's another story to be told there, who gave us the opportunity to be heard. If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have been heard. We got to give him
he definitely created the first metal label.
Yeah, in our
where the roster was metal bands, not African bands and pop bands and all this other stuff. It was, and there was no Friends of Harry in there, although there was the Outsiders, you know. But it was like, he was the go-to guy for metal, because maybe his chops weren't quite there yet, but he got it.
Yeah,
he got what it's supposed to sound like, and if it meant putting a rat pedal on the vocal, then you put a rat pedal on the vocal. No one else in South Africa would try that.
Yeah,
no.
Nobody.
But
this also bled over into live shit. Like Odyssey was one of probably the first metal bands there that played big shows, like the Rand Easter show and that. So now you're getting all these African bands and pop bands like PJ Powers and all this shit at the Rand show, sounding fucking fantastic. And you get Odyssey walk on the stage, and the sound man just goes, "What the fuck? What is going on?" Yeah, and sure, the whole visual is there, and Odyssey's in all their spandex and shit, and looking fucking cool, but they're sounding like shit because the guy.
It's all snare and vocals, and there's no guitars because they're shit scared of turning the guitars up, you know.
It was always like mostly the drums were too loud. That's it. You know what I mean?
Because that's pop.
To beat the shit out of them.
Just to get the record straight, when did Phillip start playing a role? I mean, let me cut to the chase. Odyssey, that album, who gets the credit there for production?
Phillip Nel.
Well, Phillip Nel.
Okay.
That was 1991, and he started playing a role before that, because when I sang on
the record came out in 1991.
Yeah,
but we started recording that from like 88. We'd already done two demos with Phillip right after the Blasts demo. I did two demos that Leon shared with me the other day, actually.
There was that Blast demo.
That's far back.
The 7-inch single was 1988.
1988. Right after that, we did the first Odyssey, the first round, so the first lineup. So it was Neil, myself, Rob, and Leon on drums. And then when Dean came back to South Africa from Belgium and put together
You got thrown out.
Ragnärok again, they found this drummer, Lawrence, who we discovered at the Thunderdome one night, and we were all just blown away. Like, where the hell did this guy come out in South Africa? What the fuck is going on here? That blew everyone away that night. You know, we all play. I don't even remember if we played on that show. I think we did, but
it wasn't even the Thunderdome, Brin. It was Golden Banana.
I saw you guys. I did, but where it really blew, where you got on the Thunderdome stage, it was the second gig, I believe, and you got on the Thunderdome stage with the lights, and you're on a stage. You're not just on like in a bar, and Lawrence comes on there. And he's got decent PA behind the drum kit, and everyone's jaw just dropped, and we were like, fuck. And us as Odyssey, we didn't know yet because Neil hadn't fired Leon yet. But that's the drummer that we want to play with, you know? And that ended up happening.
And another salute to Craig Rosa, because we had a poster up in Hillbrow Records looking for a drummer, and Craig Rosa went there to look at some records, and he saw Lawrence fresh from Durban. Lawrence had driven in straight from Durban to Hillbrow and was reading the poster. And Craig said to him, "I know the guys," and that's how.
Okay, right. So back to Philip now. Give the oak the due. Like where did?
Okay, but just I know it's nitty gritty here, but now Ragnärok also went through Philip's doors.
Yes, later after Odyssey.
Okay.
Odyssey. After our first round, and then afterwards, but with Lawrence though.
Yeah, with Lawrence after the Odyssey album. The second time we got back together.
Oh, the second time, because then so what happened was Lawrence one day came and visited me, or he was living in the building next to me in Hillbrow, and we got talking, and next minute he was like, you know what? I came up from Durban to play top quality music, as heavy as I can muster, but it's got to be good. And he wanted to play with good musicians. I had a classical background, so I was fairly confident in what I could do. Neil had just picked up a bass, so he wasn't. So I was showing him where to put his fingers. But the discussion with Lawrence turned into him leaving Ragnärok and coming to join Odyssey. And I think that for a lot of, even though there were some hard feelings at the time with the rest of the band, because now we stole their drummer and all this and that, we can get into that, but we don't need to. What it did is it paired me up with Lawrence. And that was a lethal combination. Because as hard as Lawrence is on, as like a drill sergeant, because he was 10 years older than us, you know? So he was a drill sergeant, and he was bringing something to the band that, as a guitar player, I didn't have. I didn't have that counting side to my playing. I played what felt good in this and that, and Lawrence just tightened that all up and made it presentable.
Did the same to us.
Because when we would play with Leon was my friend from school. He was fun and all this and that, but he was a bit of a sloppy drummer. He wanted to be Neil Peart. But he didn't have it in him. He didn't have it naturally. You can feel when someone's got it. And so when Lawrence and I got together, it was like a done deal. And I gave him what he was looking for, which was being able to get more complex with compositions, and having like a keen ear for the musicality of it. And he brought to my table the drum part of it, and I think that's what catapulted Odyssey further ahead.
But Brin, I remember going to record with Phillip Nel, and then what the studio is called, and Universal. Like open the drawer, and he'd open his little matchbox, because then he knew, okay, he has heavy shit coming. And the weirdest thing, he's always used to talk about my drummer Davey Leo, when he said, okay, he's got to get Lawrence Bailey's timing. And I used to go, dude, you're not going to get Lawrence's timing.
Unless you're a metronome.
Yeah, Lawrence's timing is back to front to back. But again, coming back to Philip Nel, I mean, we got to give him credit. I mean, the bands, VOD, Odyssey, Ragnärok, Debauchery, Abhorrence, Urban Assault, of course. Who have I forgotten?
Brothers, all of them.
He sold his soul to the devil, right? I mean, he quit. He had a contract with EMI. paid decent money, I'm sure, working all hours. He records everyone from Karika Kersenkamp to everything who's been on music, to go and put his soul on the line to put the metal bands out there. I mean, give the guy credit. I mean, he makes some money from us. Good for him. And he was the foundation of what took bands to the next level. And what's happened after that? Johan, you'll tell us.
Well, it was because of him that all of us bands got our stuff actually played, even though it was at 3 a.m. on radio.
Got out of the garage. We got out of the garage thanks to Phillip Nel. If it wasn't for Phillip Nel, there was no platform for us. There was no stage for us to show what we can sound like. Because when you go and see it at the gig, the energy's there, but the sound is shit. And here, it was just like when you hear yourself recorded, and someone who actually is into it, and he's banging his head while you're playing it, and while he's mixing it, you're like, okay, he gets it. And he really did get it. And like I said, the chops weren't quite up there yet. They probably got better in that genre, in that style, because of course he was also coming from the pop, from the African music. I mean, it was just like
Western
hours every day recording African bands, because that was the bread and butter in South Africa. Metal bands, even the white bands, the pop bands, they didn't even really feature on the radar. Yeah. Because there was no market for it. There was not enough white people to buy the music to make it worthwhile.
And you know what, Bruno, was interesting? I remember, bless his soul, I mean, we all bands like that on any stable of bands. So you're right. We go to a gig and they'd have a sound engineer. And really, as soon as you did the sound check, the sound engineer had no fucking clue. You could just see it was deer in the headlights. How the fuck am I going to make this sound work? And there Phillip, a humble, quiet self in the back, he'd go and he'd set the fucking tweaking the sound in the sound check. And as the gig began, you knew that Phillip would go and do the best he could with a fucked up PA to get us the sound. And everything was taking the levels and just push them to all men play on 11. And he didn't have to do that as label manager, but he's there quiet in the corner, bless his soul. Quirky character.
Very. I remember I was lucky enough to be able to record with Phillip as well. I think it was in Downtown Records.
Yeah, he was in Downtown afterwards. Yeah,
Downtown, and he said, like, in his fashion, he would say, "Now go set up your booths and your amps and stuff." And now, me as a novice, I set my amp the way I want it. Like, it needs to be chunky. It needs to have at least as much bottom end as Justice for All. So everything's set up. I'm like fucking happy, man. So anyway, then he comes around like a drill sergeant, and he goes, "No way, no, cut that fucking bass, cut that gain, cut this, cut that." So I was like, "Fuck, man, this is like a Bryan Adams sound." It says, "Don't you worry, don't you worry." And lo and behold, after he sent us out of the studio and played it back, I was like, "Fuck." It was a valuable lesson. It was like not everything, you have to leave room for a bassist, a very good bassist, I might add, Dick and Harper. And my God, how are you going to get a sound when everything is just, Yeah.
And I've gotten compliments even in the States on the sound of the drums on the Odyssey record. Because they don't sound like metal drums. They're kind of punchy like pop drums still, but they're so clear and kind of upfront and in your face that you can't miss them. And that has been one of the main remarks that I've gotten from those recordings. If I had it my way, and if I had the master tapes, like the multi-tracks, I would remix it today, because I have another ear and I can hear where, that kills me every time I listen to it. I would remix it today. But for the time and what we were doing and who was allowed and who was facilitating that, it was Inhouse Records.
I also think that the compliments on those drums is probably also because of Lawrence's playing as well.
Yeah, he plays.
We didn't play to a click, but I bet you could put a click to the music and it would stay on.
The click will follow Lawrence.
Can I share?
Might I add, it's still a damn good sounding record for that time.
I agree. And I have to say, I have one sealed and one used. So that's my pension in years to come. Yeah. I just have to say, talking about Neil Ford, bless his soul. I mean, God, there's stories to be told about Neil Ford on bass. But when he left two dogs funking, and no one would employ him. So as Metamorphosis, we got him on bass, and we cut the demo. I think it was the second album. I can't remember. And we'd partying in Hillbrow on Rocky Street all night long, and then I'd drive home, still wide awake, and then drive back to go into the studio for Cheap Time with Phillip Nel. Wake up Neil Ford, who was hardly sleeping, or comatose. Phillip Nel, bless it, put him on his chair with a bass guitar. I mean, have you ever heard of a bass player who puts headphones with a click track on his head? He's off his face, his eyes aren't even open, and he played that Embrace Your Creation album. Like, you would hear the bass stuff on this, incredible. Never rehearsed it, and he'd play that with a click track like this, totally stoned, sitting in a chair. I mean, he is just incredible. That was Phillip Nel's point I'm making, is his patience of picking the musician, getting the sound like he did to you, Johan. With Neil Ford was a little different. Okay, we're not going to shoot and get that bass sound, so we're just going to put you on a chair. You sit still. We're going to put earphones on you, get a click track, and then you're going to play that bass sound. That's Neil Ford. I mean, Brin and Dean can totally rate if I think I'm speaking shit, but that is Neil Ford, a legend. Yeah.
Oh. Neil's man.
We could tell stories that this would give a triple X rating to this channel. Rocky Street.
My time in London with Neil Ford is not legendary yet, because not many people know about it, but the book will come out eventually.
Well, look forward to it.
It'll be a worthwhile read.
Do you remember you're not going to go any further.
Remember that gig we played in Odyssey in like fucking some Dutchman dorp somewhere, bro? And while we play, they walk up and they put a note in front of Brin's feet, and he's singing, and he looks at the note and it says, "Please stop."
That was in Klerksdorp.
Oh, that was fucked up, bro.
When we were smoking weed under the stage, and it was all coming through the stage.
And we pissed in the piano.
We pissed in the piano, and basically a bunch. The Joburg crowd. This is what the Joburg crowd would do. They would follow us down to Durban for like the festival or something, so that we wouldn't just be playing to like pop fans. There would always be this little crew of Joburg headbangers that would follow us to the gigs, and they followed us to Klerksdorp to that gig, and they started moshing at one point, and the security guys, there were some security guys there, someone there who was there, kicked them all out because thought they were fighting, and beat them up outside, and then came and put the note on the stage that says, "Can you please stop? People are leaving."
Read it, but it's a dyke.
And just don't you forget, Odyssey started the metal scene.
Yeah. You have to start with that.
Yeah, and they collapsed the metal scene too, but that's fucking because we can't buy the albums because it's too expensive.
Yeah,
Take a piss break.
I'll give you an album.
Let's take a piss break.
Looking for you.